Peter, I'd like to start with how was the organisation founded?
It was founded about just over 30 years ago after we came across a young boy sleeping on the streets, 9 years of age. So we got a little house together and we took in a few kids like him, ran that for a few years, and then the numbers started growing and growing and growing, so we realised we had to expand and get more houses, and that meant getting more funding, so we formed the organisation, which was originally called the Arupe Society after a famous Jesuit Superior General. But we changed the name about 10 years ago to the Peter McVerry Trust because nobody ever heard of Arupe, so everybody was saying, what does that mean? So we're in operation now about 35 years.
And I assume you've heard the statistics of the recent census that over 450 children under the age of 14 become homeless in Dublin.
Yes, the most worrying feature of homelessness now is the number of families with children becoming homeless. It's gone from 7 or 8 families a month in 2012 to over 100 families a month this year. And currently in the whole country, there are 912 families in emergency accommodation with between them over 1,800 children. And that really is frightening, because a child in emergency accommodation, especially if that goes on for months on end, as it is doing, that child is being damaged emotionally, damaged psychologically, and also damaged educationally, because the children are stressed out, the whole family is stressed out living in an hotel bedroom. The child and the young people going to school, you can't go to school and study and concentrate and come home and do your homework if you're stressed out all the time. So their education is also being damaged by this experience.
Yeah. Tell me, Peter, what do you think other people can do if they see young people or children on the streets homeless?
You won't see very many children on the streets these days. Most services for young people under 18 have improved immensely, we'd have to admit that. However, the crisis at the moment is children with their parents or with one parent who become homeless. So you won't see them on the street particularly. They will be placed in hotel accommodation, in bed and breakfast accommodation, or in hostel accommodation for families. But if people do come across homeless people on the street, my advice is always just to be friendly, not just to ignore them, because most people have this perception of homeless people that there's something wrong with them, that's why they're homeless. They have an addiction problem, or they have a mental health problem, or they have a behaviour problem, which is why they're homeless. And so most people ignore homeless people. And my advice is, when you pass a homeless person, just to say hello, just to stop for 10 seconds and just have a chat and treat them as just an ordinary human being, the same as any of us, which is what in reality they are.
And is there anything that people can do to help the fight against the homeless crisis in Dublin at the moment?
I think there's two things. Obviously they can raise funds. Most of the charities working with homeless people are very dependent on fundraising. But as well as that, ultimately homelessness is a political problem. The solution to homelessness is to provide people with a home.
Yeah.
Now, only the government can do that. The charities can do a little bit of it. I mean, we have about 200 apartments. We can give 200 homeless people a home for the rest of their lives. But there's 100,000 families waiting on accommodation, and we can't even begin to address that scale of problem. So ultimately the problem lies with government to address. And so I think people can write to their local TD, write to the Taoiseach, get their friends to do the same, approach their local TD and try and impress on them the urgency of addressing the problem of homelessness.
I'm going to move on to teen homelessness now. And do you know of any ways that teens can prevent themselves from becoming homeless, or, you know, anything like that, you know?
It sometimes can be very difficult. Usually a young teenager becoming homeless, it's usually caused by a breakdown in relationship with one or both of their parents. And that's outside the control of the teenager, unfortunately. It can be for obvious reasons like parents who are drinking heavily, parents with a drug problem, perhaps parents who are a parent who is very violent. It can be for any of those obvious reasons, but it can also be for no reason. We had one young man came to us late at night, and he stayed with us for a while, and then we couldn't understand why he was homeless. Parents were lovely parents, the house was a lovely house, but then he confided in us that he was being abused by a youth leader who lived quite close to where his parents, and he couldn't tell his parents that. And so what happened was, he was mitching from school then, and his mitching from school was really a cry for help, but his parents couldn't read that because they didn't understand that. So it's sometimes it's a breakdown in communication with parents, and if you can help the young person and the parents to restore communication, that will resolve the problem. So in that case, the young fella confided in me, and then he allowed me to tell his parents, and we were all able to sit down and talk about it, and that was the beginning of solving the problem. So communication between the parents and the young person is vital to preventing homelessness.
And last question, do you think, is there anything else that you would like to say to those watching this at home, how to prevent or approach homelessness?
What would I say to people? Just to be not to be judgmental. Usually when people leave home, it's through no fault of their own. It's a breakdown in relationship, which may be nobody's fault. It's increasingly today, it's because they can't afford to pay the rent in a private rental market where the rents are going through the roof. Or it's the financial institutions have repossessed their home and they become homeless. So homelessness today is not due to any fault on the part of the person who's becoming homeless. Even where people have an addiction problem, like an alcohol or a drug addiction problem, very often they're using the alcohol or the drugs to try and cope with very distressing childhood experiences that they've had and that have never been dealt with. They've never had counselling for the violence or the abuse or the neglect which they experienced as children. So the vast majority of homeless people are homeless through no fault of their own. They need support and help. They don't need to be judged. They don't need to be kept at arm's length. They don't need to be made feel that they are not part of the society that they're living in.
Thanks very much for your time.
Not at all.